She saw him the moment he stepped onto the plain tall shoulders, straight like he had been trained to stand that way, hair grey, but not messy like he still respected mirrors. Even if he had no one left to impress, his eyes scanned the cabin once and then landed on row 6, without hesitation. Without looking at his ticket, he walked there, placed a single black briefcase in the overhead bin, and sat down like he had done this exact movement 1,000 times before. Tara had worked this flight from Denver to Chicago for the last 5 years, and she'd had seen them all, the excited tourists, the nervous flyers, the business people with too many meetings and too little rest. But this man, he did not fit anywhere. His face was too calm, his movements too certain, like he was not a passenger, but part of something else, something that watched instead of travelled. As boarding continued, people walked by him, without noticing. Not one person glanced at him, not even by accident. Usually passengers give polite nods or awkward smiles, but here it was as if row 6 seat I was not there at all. The plane filled up. Tara moved through her checks, smiling, offering help lifting bags, calming nerves, but every few minutes her eyes drifted back to him, to that still frame in row 6, where time did not seem to pass. He did not speak, did not shift, did not blink. When the door closed and the engines hummed to life, she finally passed his row cart, in hand, ready for the first round of service. She paused just before reaching him, her hand hesitated near the tray. Something deep inside told her to keep walking. She did, not out of fear but instinct. She served the rest of the cabin without issues, smiles, thanks, tiny cups of soda, and the occasional joke, but none of it felt real with him, sitting there silent and still, like he had been carved from something older than stone. She skipped him again on the way back, told herself she would offer next round. Maybe he was sleeping, maybe he had a medical condition, maybe it was nothing. Her co-worker Lauren leaned over during a quiet moment and whispered, "That guy in row 6, did you serve him yet?" Tara shook her head. Lauren said, "I tried, but he just stared straight ahead, didn't move, didn't blink, like he didn't hear me." Tara nodded slowly. "I know." They both looked back at him, then at each other, both too experienced to be easily rattled, and yet neither of them had any explanation. When turbulence hit midair, the plane dipped slightly, trays rattled, seatbelts clicked tighter. Tara reached for the nearest rail and found herself just beside row 6. The man had not moved. His hands still rested on the armrest, size forward, posture perfect. Something was not right. And somewhere deep in her gut, Tara knew this was not the first time this man had taken this flight. She stood still for a moment, holding the edge of the cart, her fingers tight against the cold metal, eyes locked on the man in row 6. Nothing about him had changed. Since takeoff, his posture was frozen, like a statue, his breathing too calm, too measured. Tara had served every passenger twice now except him, and something inside her refused to let her reach out, not because she was scared, but because it felt like the moment she did something would shift, something would unravel that could not be put back. Her mind went to training years ago, when they told her, "Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is." But training never mentioned men who looked like ghosts in pressed shirts, sitting motionless at 30,000 feet. She looked at his hands, clean, firm, resting on the armrests, not clenched, not relaxed, almost like he was waiting for her, or for something else she could not see. The captain announced slight turbulence ahead, and the seatbelt signs lit up. Tara locked the cart into place and took a slow breath as she moved to the galley, but she glanced back once more at row 6 and felt it again, that invisible wall that surrounded him like a quiet pressure. Lauren was organizing coffee cups when Tara stepped in. "He still hasn't moved," Tara said. Lauren nodded, like she had already been thinking the same thing. "I walked by again. He didn't blink, his eyes look straight ahead, like he's watching something, but there's nothing there, the shade is down." Tara leaned against the counter, not tired, just unsettled. Maybe he's deaf, maybe he doesn't speak English. Lauren shook her head. I said hello 3 times and leaned close enough to smell his cologne. He heard me, he just didn't react. Tara turned her head, slowly listening to the quiet hum of the plane. Something's wrong, she said finally. Lauren frowned. You want to ask the pilot? Not yet, Tara said. Let's give it time. The flight leveled out, the turbulence passed, and Tara returned to her rounds, keeping her eyes on the passengers. But her thoughts in row 6, when she passed him again, she noticed something new. The briefcase in the overhead bin above him was slightly ajar. She hadn't heard it open, and no one else had been near it. She was certain she had closed it during boarding. Her hand reached for it, but she stopped inches away, her heart picking up pace. She looked down at him, but his face was still like a man listening for something. She took a step back, reset her smile, and moved on. In the back of the plane, she pulled out the tablet with the passenger list and began scrolling, not knowing why, not knowing what she expected to find, just knowing that her instincts were pushing her towards something she did not understand. Row 6, Sita. She scrolled down slowly. The name stared back at her. Captain Raymond Mercer. She froze. She knew that name. Everyone in aviation did. He was the pilot who never made it home 6 years ago, on a flight just like this one. Her fingers hovered over the screen, frozen, the name still glowing back at her, like it was waiting for her to react, like it knew she would stop right there. Captain Raymond Mercer. It was not a common name, and in this industry, it was not a forgotten one. Tara remembered the story clearly. 6 years ago. A flight headed east, caught in a violent storm. The plane dipped low, too low, and something failed in the cockpit. Captain Mercer lost control, or maybe his heart gave out. No one really knew. He had been declared dead, but his body had never been recovered. Only his pilot log and a sealed briefcase were found days later in a field miles from the nearest airport. She had read about it during training, not because they made them, but because she could not stop thinking about how a man could vanish mid-flight, leaving only ink and silence behind. Now she was staring at his name listed on her manifest plane as daylight, seated in row 6, seat A, and her hands began to tremble. She walked slowly back up the aisle, not looking at passengers, not smiling, not speaking, each step heavier than the last, until she reached row 6 and stopped. The man was still there, back straight, eyes forward, unmoving. She looked at him this time, really looked at him, not just as a flight attendant, but as someone who had seen too many faces, too many stories, and she saw it now. He looked exactly like the photographs in the report. She had red hair, the same silver-grey face, lined with time, but strong uniform jacket, too crisp for a regular passenger. But it was the wings on his collar that caught her attention. They were not from this airline. They were from the one that went under after the crash, the one Captain Mercer had flown for. Her lips parted to say something, but no sound came, just the soft hiss of cabin air and the faint rattle of trays. He blinked once, slow, deliberate, then turned his head slightly, just enough to meet her eyes. Tara felt something cold rush through her like air from an open hatch. His eyes were sharp but empty, like looking through glass. She wanted to ask his name, ask if he needed anything, ask what this was, but she couldn't speak, not because she was scared, but because she knew on some deep level that he was not here to talk. He was here for something else. And somehow, he was not done flying yet. She stepped back, heart pounding, sweat gathering behind her neck, and she reached for the intercom, pretending to check in with the cockpit, but really just needing something to hold on to, something real. Lauren met her in the galley again, her face pale. "Did you see it?" she whispered. "See what?" Tara asked. "His seatbelt. It's not fastened. It never was. And the overhead bin above him is shut again." Tara turned slowly toward the front of the plane. They had 2 hours left in the air, and for the first time in her career, She wasn't sure they were going to land the same way they took off. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as clouds passed thick and grey outside the windows. Tara stood near the galley door, her hand resting on the wall, her eyes locked on the aisle, trying not to look back at row 6, but unable to stop herself from feeling it. Something was different now. Passengers were quiet more than usual, as if they sensed a shift in the air, a heaviness that made them raid the safety card twice or hold their coffee a little tighter. No one was laughing, no one was asking for anything, and that silence made her more nervous than any turbulence ever could. She turned to Lauren, who was standing still, eyes wide, her hand hovering near the intercom. "We should tell the captain," Tara said. "Tell him what?" Lauren replied. "That we think a dead man is sitting in row 6. Tara didn't answer, because the truth was she didn't know what they could say that wouldn't sound insane. She only knew what she felt, and it was stronger now, the sense that they were not flying with 136 passengers, but with one more, something that didn't belong here, not anymore. She took a breath and decided to do what she always did. When something didn't make sense, she went back to check for herself. Walking down the aisle, her steps slow, deliberate, she passed row 5 and paused. He was still there. Captain Raymond Mercer, or whoever he was, sat perfectly upright, hands resting flat on his thighs, but something had changed, and it took her a moment to notice. His briefcase was gone. The overhead bin was open and empty. She didn't see anyone take it, she didn't hear it open, and no one else had stood up. She felt the chill again, the same one from earlier, only colder, like walking past an open freezer door in the dead of winter. She reached slowly for the seat back in front of him, steadying herself as she leaned forward. "Sir." Her voice cracked more than she expected. "Can I help you with something?" He turned his head slowly, just enough to face her, his eyes locked on hers, and for a moment she felt like she was being pulled into something vast, something full of voices she could not hear. His lips parted, but no words came. Only the faintest movement, like he was trying to speak in a place where speech no longer worked. The plane shook lightly just then, not from turbulence, but like a small jolt from inside something shifting beneath the floor. She straightened and stepped back, chest tight, pulse racing. Behind her, a child began to cry softly, the sound sharp in the quiet air. Tara turned and walked quickly back to the galley, her legs stiff, her breath shallow. Lauren met her eyes again. "What did he say?" Tara shook her head. "Nothing. But I think he wants something." She looked back toward row 6. "And I think he's not leaving without it." Tara stood in the galley, staring at the coffee pot, not because she needed it, but because it was something ordinary, something solid, something untouched by whatever was happening in row 6. The hum of the plane was steady, and the occasional ding of a call button came from the back, but her mind was not on coffee or passengers or flight schedules. Her mind was on a name: Captain Raymond Mercer. She had read the report twice, once during training, and once again years later when she could not sleep after working a particularly rough story flight. She remembered the way his story stuck with her, like a splinter, quiet and deep, how his last words were never recorded, how the only thing recovered besides the briefcase was a set of cockpit notes, ending mid-sentence. She looked at Lauren, who was quietly checking supplies, pretending not to be shaken, pretending that they were still just working another Wednesday flight from Denver, but her hands were trembling. "He looked at me," Lauren whispered. "Did he say anything?" Tara asked. "No, but I think he knows." "Knows what?" "That we know he's not supposed to be here." Tara exhaled slowly, then turned and walked back down the aisle again, trying not to overthink every footstep, trying to stay calm. Even though everything about this flight felt wrong, she passed row 4, then 5, and stopped at 6. He was gone. The seat was empty. The overhead bin was still open, but there was nothing inside, no bag, no jacket, no briefcase. She looked around the cabin, But no one had moved. Everyone was seated watching their movies, reading their books, sleeping. "Sir." She whispered it low, hoping maybe he had gone to the restroom or stood up to stretch. She checked the nearby lavatory. Vacant. She opened the rear one as well. Empty. She checked with Lauren, who shook her head. No one passed me. Tara's pulse climbed, and for a moment she just stood still, then reached for the passenger tablet again, hands colder than before. She scrolled to row 6, seat A, and the name was still there, Captain Raymond Mercer. But now there was something else, a red symbol. Beside it, a small icon she had never seen before, not a meal note, not a security flag, something else. She tapped it, nothing opened. The screen glitched for a moment, then went dark. When it came back, the seat was listed as vacant. She stared at the tablet, feeling her throat tighten. That seat's been empty since takeoff. A voice came from behind her. She turned and saw a man from maintenance uniform, wrinkled eyes, tired. He had boarded last minute to fix an overhead bin, and now he stood there pointing at the tablet. Row 6 had a service note. Before the flight, no passenger was assigned. "I fixed that seat this morning. It had a wiring issue. No one was supposed to sit there." Tara stood frozen, staring at the tablet, her mind racing faster than she could follow. Row 6 was not supposed to have a passenger, but she had seen him, she had spoken to him, his name was on the manifest. It was impossible, but it was right in front of her. She turned to the maintenance man standing in the aisle, staring at her, confused, but also somehow detached, like he didn't care if she believed him or not. "You're saying no one was ever supposed to sit there?" Tara asked, her voice quieter than she meant. The man nodded slowly, like this was just another day in the skies, nothing strange here. "The seat was blocked for maintenance when I came on this morning. I checked the manifest, it was clear." She looked around the cabin again. No one was watching. No one even noticed the conversation happening between her and this man, like they were both invisible. "What about the briefcase?" she asked. "The briefcase?" Tara felt her heart escape. "The one that was up there in the overhead bin, the one that was missing." The man shrugged. "I didn't see any briefcase." Tara's stomach twisted as if she had swallowed ice. She took a step back, but not out of fear, more like an instinct to distance herself from something that no longer made sense. She glanced at the flight attendant call button and considered hitting it, but then she thought about the captain. How could she explain this to him? How could she tell him she thought there was a ghost on board? The cabin remained eerily still, and for a moment Tara felt like she was the only one aware of the strange presence that had settled in the air around them. She looked back at the maintenance worker, who seemed to be waiting for something, maybe an answer, maybe an apology, maybe something she didn't understand. "When did you check the manifest?" she asked slowly. "This morning when I boarded the flight. We all do it." But the manifest showed Captain Mercer. He nodded again, the same distant expression on his face. "You can check with the cockpit, they have the full list." Tara turned and walked away before she could stop herself, her feet moving faster than her mind could keep up. She reached the galley where Lauren was preparing more drinks and quickly filled her in on the maintenance worker's story, but Lauren only looked more confused. "He wasn't supposed to be there either," she said softly. "And yet he was," Tara said, looking out the small window at the grey sky, trying to steady her breathing. "I saw him. I talked to him." Lauren shook her head. "There's no one in row 6. No one." The intercom crackled and Tara grabbed the handset before it could finish. "Captain, this is Tara in the cabin." She could feel her voice shaking, but forced it steady. "You need to check row 6. There's a problem." The intercom clicked, and Tara's voice was all she could hear in her ears, even though she knew she wasn't speaking loud enough for anyone to notice the way her breath caught between each word. "Captain, this is Tara in the cabin." She repeated it twice, but no answer came. She glanced around at the quiet cabin, Once more everything felt like it was frozen in time, like the seconds were stretching out too long. The hum of the engines felt distant now, like it was fading. The sound of the air vent above her was too loud, too harsh. She grabbed the handset again. "Captain, it's Tara, please respond." There was a long pause before the voice finally crackled through. "This is the captain, Tara, we raid you." Tara's throat tightened, but she forced the words out. "You need to check row 6. There's something wrong." The silence from the other end was so thick, it almost felt like the captain had stopped breathing. "What exactly is the problem, Tara?" he asked slowly, like he didn't believe her. Tara closed her eyes, trying to steady herself, but the image of row 6 filled her mind, the empty seat where Captain Mercer had sat, where she had seen him sit moments ago. The briefcase was gone, and now he was gone. The seat had been empty the entire time, yet she knew with every fibre of her being that he had been there, and that something wasn't right. "It's not just the seat, Captain," she said, her voice low. "Something's wrong with the manifest." The captain sighed deeply on the other end. "Tara, there is no issue with the manifest." "You're mistaken." Tara felt a wave of cold rush over her. She gripped the handset tighter. "I'm not mistaken. Row 6 had a passenger, a man named Raymond Mercer." There was another long silence this time. It stretched long enough for Tara to feel her chest tighten with dread. She didn't know how to explain it. She didn't know what was happening, but she couldn't let it go now. "There's no Raymond Mercer listed on the manifest, Tara," the captain said, his voice turning colder. Tara opened her mouth to respond, but stopped herself just before she spoke. What she wanted to say was that she had seen him, that she had talked to him, that his presence in row 6 was undeniable. But instead her eyes darted to the front of the cabin, where the stewardess cart had stopped in front of a young man who was now speaking to Lauren. He was gesturing urgently, his eyes wide, like something had just occurred to him, something that had made him turn pale and start walking toward the front. The man in row 6 was not on the plane anymore. He had never been on the plane. Tara's heart raced as she took a step forward. "Wait," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" The stewardess standing nearby overheard her and turned toward her sharply. "Row 6 has always been empty, Tara. There was no passenger named Mercer." Tara's vision blurred as she looked back at row 6. Empty. Again. Tara stood still, her eyes locked on the empty row 6 seat, her heart racing, like it might burst through her chest. She looked down the aisle again, glancing at the stewardess who had spoken to her, but the words felt like they came from a different world. There was no passenger named Mercer. It didn't make sense. The man she had seen sitting there, the man she had talked to, the man who had looked at her with those cold, empty eyes, was gone. Her pulse raced, her throat tight, as she walked down the aisle again, this time more slowly, searching for anything that made sense, looking for a clue, assigning something to hold on to. But row 6 was still empty. She stopped at the seat again, her eyes scanning the area around it. There were no bags, no belongings, no sign anyone had been there. She touched the back of the seat, her fingers brushing against the smooth fabric, the hairs on her neck standing up like she could feel the weight of something unseen. "Tara." Lauren's voice was low behind her, but Tara couldn't turn around. Her body felt frozen, like the world was closing in. "Tara." She heard it again, louder now. She turned slowly to see Lauren standing near the galley, looking at her with concern. "Are you okay?" Tara nodded slowly, trying to speak, but no words came out. Her mouth was dry, her thoughts a jumbled mesh. She couldn't figure out how to explain it, how to make sense of the feeling pressing against her chest, like something was wrong, something was so deeply wrong, she could almost taste it. "It's like he was never here," Tara finally whispered, "but I know he was." Lauren stepped forward, her eyes wide with confusion. "What are you talking about?" "The man in row 6, Tara," said her voice shaking. It was him. It was Captain Raymond Mercer. Lauren's face twisted in disbelief. "Tara, you need to get a grip." I saw him. He was real. Lauren shook her head slowly. "Tara, no one was in row 6. Not ever." She looked at Tara with a mixture of pity and concern, like she didn't know how to help her, but didn't want to make it worse. Then suddenly the intercom clicked on again, and this time Tara's heart skipped. It wasn't the captain's voice. It was a voice she didn't recognize. "We are about to land." Tara's head snapped toward the cockpit door, her breath catching. "We are about to land." She knew they were still hours from their destination. She couldn't breathe, she couldn't think, she could only move her feet before they took her to the cockpit door that was locked tight, but the voice kept repeating the same words. "We are about to land." She tried to turn back, but her feet wouldn't listen as the overhead lights flickered once, twice, then went out entirely, leaving only the emergency lights casting a dim red glow over the cabin. It was too late. The plane had already begun its descent. And Captain Raymond Mercer was still on board.